whether I wear mine own clothes or thine, while it keeps on haunting thee continually. If it does so, and appears often, I should myself say that it was from God. For the rest, if thy mind is fixed, and it isn't possible to turn thee from thy design, but I must needs go and sleep in thy bed, well and good, let it be even so. And when I've done as thou wishest, then let the dream appear to me. Till such time, however, I shall keep to my former opinion. Thus spake Artabanus, and when he had so said, thinking to show Xerxes that his words were naught, he did according to his orders. Having put on the garments which Xerxes was wont to wear, and taken his seat upon the royal throne, he lay down to sleep upon the king's own bed. As he slept, there appeared to him the very same dream which had been seen by Xerxes. It came and stood over Artabanus, and said, Thou art the man, then, who, feigning to be tender of Xerxes, seekest to dissuade him from leading his armies against the Greeks. But thou shalt not escape scatheless, neither now nor in time to come, because thou hast sought to prevent that which is fated to happen. As for Xerxes, it has been plainly told to himself what will befall him if he refuses to perform my bidding. In such words as Artabanus thought, the vision threatened him, and then endeavoured to burn out his eyes with red-hot irons. At this he shrieked, and leaping from his couch, hurried to Xerxes, and sitting down at his side, gave him a full account of the vision, after which he went on to speak in the words which follow. I, O king, am a man who has seen many mighty empires overthrown by weaker ones, and therefore it was that I sought to hinder thee from being quite carried away by thy youth, since I knew how evil a thing it is to covet more than one possesses. I could remember the expedition of Cyrus against the Massagetae, and what was the issue of it. I could recollect the march of Cambyses against the Ethiops. I had taken part in the attack of Darius upon the Scyths. Bearing therefore all these things in mind, I thought with myself, that if thou shouldst remain at peace, all men would deem thee fortunate. But as this impulse has plainly come from above, and a heaven-sent destruction seems about to overtake the Greeks, behold, I change to another mind, and alter my thoughts upon the matter. Do thou therefore make known to the Persians what the god has declared, and bid them follow the orders which were first given, and prepare their levies. Be careful to act, so that the bounty of the god may not be hindered by slackness on thy part. Thus spake these two together. And Xerxes, being in good heart on account of the vision, when day broke, laid all before the Persians, while Artabanus, who had formerly been the only person openly to oppose the expedition, now showed as openly that he favoured it. After Xerxes had thus determined to go forth to the war, there appeared to him in his sleep yet a third vision. The Magi were consulted upon it, and said that its meaning reached to the whole earth, and that all mankind would become his servants. Now the vision which the king saw was this. He dreamt that he was crowned with a branch of an olive tree, and that boughs spread out from the olive branch and covered the whole earth. Then suddenly the garland, as it lay upon his brow, vanished. So when the Magi had thus interpreted the vision, straightway all the Persians who were come together departed to their several governments, where each displayed the greatest zeal on the faith of the king's offers, for all hoped to obtain for themselves the gifts which had been promised. And so Xerxes gathered together his host, ransacking every corner of the continent. Reckoning from the recovery of Egypt, Xerxes spent 4 full years in collecting his host and making ready all things that were needful for his soldiers. It was until the close of the 5th year that he set forth on his march, accompanied by a mighty multitude. For of all the armaments whereof any mention has reached us, this was by far the greatest. insomuch that no other expedition compared to this seems of any account, neither that which Darius undertook against the Scythians, nor the expedition of the Scythians, which the attack of Darius was designed to avenge, when they, being in pursuit of the Cimmerians, fell upon the Median territory and subdued and held for a time almost the whole of Upper Asia. Nor again that of the Atridae against Troy, of which we hear in story, nor that of the Mysians and Teucrians, which was still earlier, wherein these nations crossed the Bosphorus into Europe, and after conquering all Thrace, pressed forward till they came to the Ionian Sea, while southward they reached as far as the river Peneus. All these expeditions, and others, if such there were, are as nothing compared with this. For was there a nation in all Asia which Xerxes did not bring with him against Greece? Or was there a river, except those of unusual size, which sufficed for his troops to drink? One nation furnished ships, another was arrayed among the foot soldiers, a third had to supply horses, a fourth transports for the horse and men, likewise for the transport service, a fifth ships of war towards the bridges, a sixth ships and provisions. And in the first place, because the former fleet had met with so great a disaster about Athos, preparations were made by the space of about 3 years in that quarter. A fleet of triremes lay at Elaeus in the Chersonese, and from this station detachments were sent by the various nations whereof the army was composed, which relieved one another at intervals, and worked at a trench beneath the lash of taskmasters, while the people dwelling about Athos bore likewise a part in the labour. 2 Persians, Bubares, the son of Megabazus, and Artachaes, the son of Artaius, superintended the undertaking. Athos is a great and famous mountain, inhabited by men and stretching far out into the sea. Where the mountain ends towards the mainland, it forms a peninsula, and in this place there is a neck of land about 12 furlongs across, the whole extent whereof, from the sea of the Acanthians to that over against Torone, is a level plain, broken only by a few low hills. Here, upon this isthmus where Athos ends, is Sani, a Greek city. Inside of Sani and upon Athos itself are a number of towns, which Xerxes was now employed in disjoining from the continent. These are Dium, Olophyxus, Acrothoum, Thysus, and Cleone. Among these cities Athos was divided. Now the manner in which they dug was the following. A line was drawn across by the city of Sani, and along this the various nations parcelled out among themselves the work to be done. When the trench grew deep, the workmen at the bottom continued to dig, while others handed the earth as it was dug out to labourers placed higher up upon ladders, and these, taking it, passed it on further, till it came at last to those at the top, who carried it off and emptied it away. All the other nations, therefore, except the Phoenicians, had double labour, for the sides of the trench fell in continually, as couldn't but happen, since they made the width no greater at the top than it was required to be at the bottom. But the Phoenicians showed in this the skill which they are wont to exhibit in all their undertakings. For in the portion of the work which was allotted to them, they began by making the trench at the top twice as wide as the prescribed measure, and then, as they dug downwards, approached the sides nearer and nearer together, so that when they reached the bottom, their part of the work was of the same width as the rest. In a meadow near there was a place of assembly and market, and hither great quantities of corn, ready ground, were brought from Asia. It seems to me, when I consider this work, that Xerxes, in making it, was actuated by a feeling of pride, wishing to display the extent of his power, and to leave a memorial behind him to posterity. For notwithstanding that it was open to him, with no trouble at all, to have had his ships drawn across the isthmus, yet he issued orders that a canal should be made through which the sea might flow, and that it should be of such a width as would allow of 2 triremes passing through it abreast with the oars in action. He likewise gave to the same persons who were set over the digging of the trench the task of making a bridge across the river Strymon. While these things were in progress, he was having cables prepared for his bridges, some of papyrus and some of white flax, a business which he entrusted to the Phoenicians and the Egyptians. He likewise laid up stores of provisions in divers places to save the army and the beasts of burthen from suffering want upon their march into Greece. He inquired carefully about all the sites, and had the stores laid up in such as were most convenient, causing them to be brought across from various parts of Asia and in various ways, some in transports and others in merchantmen. The greater portion was carried to Leuciacte upon the Thracian coast. Some part, however, was conveyed to Tyrannida in the country of the Perinthians, some to Doriscus, some to Ion upon the Strymon, and some to Macedonia. During the time that all these labours were in progress, the land army which had been collected was marching with Xerxes towards Sardis, having started from Critalla in Cappadocia. At this spot all the host which was about to accompany the king in his passage across the continent had been bidden to assemble. And here I have not in my power to mention which of the satraps was adjudged to have brought his troops in the most gallant array, and on that account rewarded by the king according to his promise, for I don't know whether this matter ever came to a judgment. But it's certain that the host of Xerxes, after crossing the river Halys, marched through Phrygia till it reached the city of Celaeni. Here are the sources of the river Maeander, and likewise of another stream of no less size, which bears the name of Cataractes, or the Cataract. The last named river has its rise in the marketplace of Celaeni, and empties itself into the Maeander. Here too, in this marketplace, is hung up to view the skin of the Silenus Marsyas, which Apollo, as the Phrygian story goes, stripped off and placed there. Now there lived in this city a certain Pythias, the son of Attis, a Lydian. This man entertained Xerxes and his whole army in a most magnificent fashion, offering at the same time to give him a sum of money for the war. Xerxes, upon the mention of money, turned to the Persians who stood by, and asked of them, "Who is this Pythias, and what wealth has he that he should venture on such an offer as this?" They answered him, "This is the man, O king, who gave thy father Darius the golden plane tree, and likewise the golden vine, and he's still the wealthiest man we know of in all the world, excepting thee." Xerxes marvelled at these last words, and now addressing Pythias with his own lips, he asked him what the amount of his wealth really was. Pythias answered as follows, "O king, I will not hide this matter from thee, nor make pretence that I don't know how rich I am, but as I know perfectly, I will declare all fully before thee. For when thy journey was noised abroad, and I heard thou wert coming down to the Grecian coast, straightway, as I wished to give thee a sum of money for the war, I made count of my stores, and found them to be 2,000 talents of silver, and of gold 4 millions of Daric staters, wanting 7,000. All this I willingly make over to thee as a gift, and when it's gone, my slaves and my estates in land will be wealth enough for my wants." This speech charmed Xerxes, and he replied, "Dear Lydian, since I left Persia, there is no man but thou who has either desired to entertain my army, or come forward of his own free will to offer me a sum of money for the war. Thou hast done both, the one and the other, feasting my troops magnificently, and now making offer of a right noble sum. In return, this is what I will bestow on thee. Thou shalt be my sworn friend from this day, and the 7,000 staters which are wanting to make up thy 4 millions I will supply, so that the full tale may be no longer lacking, and that thou mayst owe the completion of the round sum to me. Continue to enjoy all that thou hast acquired hitherto, and be sure to remain ever such as thou now art. If thou dost, thou wilt not repent of it so long as thy life endures." When Xerxes had so spoken, and had made good his promises to Pythias, he pressed forward upon his march, and passing Anaua, a Phrygian city, and a lake from which salt is gathered, he came to Colossae, a Phrygian city of great size, situated at a spot where the river Lycus plunges into a chasm and disappears. This river, after running underground a distance of about 5 furlongs, reappears once more and empties itself like the stream above mentioned into the Maeander. Leaving Colossae, the army approached to the borders of Phrygia, where it abuts on Lydia. And here they came to a city called Kydrara, where was a pillar set up by Croesus, having an inscription on it, showing the boundaries of the two countries. Where it quits Phrygia and enters Lydia, the road separates. The way on the left leads into Caria, while that on the right conducts to Sardis. If you follow this route, you must cross the Maeander and then pass by the city Calatibus, where the men live who make honey out of wheat and the fruit of the tamarisk. Xerxes, who chose this way, found here a plane tree so beautiful that he presented it with golden ornaments and put it under the care of one of his immortals. The day after, he entered the Lydian capital. Here his first care was to send off heralds into Greece who were to prefer a demand for earth and water, and to require that preparations should be made everywhere to feast the king. To Athens indeed, and to Sparta he sent no such demand, but these cities accepted his messengers went everywhere. Now the reason why he sent for earth and water to states which had already refused was this. He thought that although they had refused when Darius made the demand, they would now be too frightened to venture to say him nay. So he sent his heralds, wishing to know for certain how it would be. Xerxes after this made preparations to advance to Abydos, where the bridge across the Hellespont from Asia to Europe was lately finished. Midway between Sestos and Maditus, in the Hellespontine Chersonese, and right over against Abydos, there's a rocky tongue of land which runs out for some distance into the sea. This is the place where no long time afterwards the Greeks under Xanthippus, the son of Ariphrone, took Ataictes, the Persian, who was at that time governor of Sestos, and nailed him living to a plank. He was the Ataictes who brought women into the temple of Protesilaus at Eleus, and there was guilty of most unholy deeds. Towards this tongue of land, then, the men to whom the business was assigned carried out a double bridge from Abydos. And while the Phoenicians constructed one line with cables of white flax, the Egyptians in the other used ropes made of papyrus. Now it's 7 furlongs across from Abydos to the opposite coast. When therefore the channel had been bridged successfully, it happened that a great storm arising broke the whole work to pieces, and destroyed all that had been done. So when Xerxes heard of it, he was full of wrath, and straightway gave orders that the Hellespont should receive 300 lashes, and that a pair of fetters should be cast into it. Nay, I've even heard it said that he bade the branders take their irons, and therewith brand the Hellespont. It's certain that he commanded those who scourged the waters to utter as they lashed them these barbarian and wicked words. Thou bitter water, thy Lord lays on thee this punishment because thou hast wronged him without a cause, having suffered no evil at his hands. Verily King Xerxes will cross thee whether thou wilt or no. Well dost thou deserve that no man should honour thee with sacrifice, for thou art of a truth a treacherous and unsavoury river. While the sea was thus punished by his orders, he likewise commanded that the overseers of the work should lose their heads. Then they whose business it was executed the unpleasant task laid upon them, and other master builders were set over the work, who accomplished it in the way which I'll now describe. They joined together triremes and pentaconters, 360 to support the bridge on the side of the Euxine Sea, and 314 to sustain the other. And these they placed at right angles to the sea, and in the direction of the current of the Hellespont, relieving by these means the tension of the shore cables. Having joined the vessels, they moored them with anchors of unusual size, that the vessels of the bridge towards the Euxine might resist the winds which blow from within the straits, and that those of the more western bridge facing the Aegean might withstand the winds which set in from the south and from the southeast. A gap was left in the Pentacontas in no fewer than 3 places to afford a passage for such light craft as chose to enter or leave the Euxine. When all this was done, they made the cables taut from the shore by the help of wooden capstans. This time, moreover, instead of using the 2 materials separately, they assigned to each bridge 6 cables, 2 of which were of white flax, while 4 were of papyrus. Both cables were of the same size and quality, but the flaxen were the heavier, weighing not less than a talent the cubit. When the bridge across the channel was thus complete, trunks of trees were sawn into planks, which were cut to the width of the bridge, and these were laid side by side upon the tightened cables, and then fastened on the top. This done, brushwood was brought and arranged upon the planks, after which earth was heaped upon the brushwood, and the whole trodden down into a solid mass. Lastly, a bulwark was set up on either side of this causeway, of such a height as to prevent the sumpter beasts and the horses from seeing over it and taking fright at the water. And now, when all was prepared, the bridges and the works at Athos, the breakwaters about the mouths of the cutting, which were made to hinder the surf from blocking up the entrances, and the cutting itself, and when the news came to Xerxes that this last was completely finished, then at length the host, having first wintered at Sardis, began its march towards Abydos, fully equipped, on the first approach of spring. At the moment of departure, the sun suddenly quitted his seat in the heavens and disappeared, though there were no clouds in sight, but the sky was clear and serene. Day was thus turned into night, whereupon Xerxes, who saw and remarked the prodigy, was seized with alarm, and sending at once for the Magians, inquired of them the meaning of the portent. They replied, "God is foreshowing to the Greeks the destruction of their cities, for the sun foretells for them, and the moon for us." So Xerxes, thus instructed, proceeded on his way with great gladness of heart. The army had begun its march when Pythias the Lydian, affrighted at the heavenly portent, and emboldened by his gifts, came to Xerxes and said, "Grant me, O my lord, a favour which is to thee a light matter, but to me of vast account." Then Xerxes, who looked for nothing less than such a prayer as Pythias in fact preferred, engaged to grant him whatever he wished, and commanded him to tell his wish freely. So Pythias, full of boldness, went on to say, "O my lord, thy servant has 5 sons, and it chances that all are called upon to join thee in this march against Greece. I beseech thee, have compassion upon my years, and let one of my sons, the eldest, remain behind, to be my prop and stay, and the guardian of my wealth. Take with thee the other 4, and when thou hast done all that is in thy heart, mayest thou come back in safety." But Xerxes was greatly angered, and replied to him, "Thou wretch, darest thou speak to me of thy son, when I am myself on the march against Greece, with sons and brothers and kinsfolk and friends? Thou who art my bond-slave, and art in duty bound to follow me with all thy household, not excepting thy wife. Know that man's spirit dwelleth in his ears, and when it hears good things, straightway it fills all his body with delight. But no sooner does it hear the contrary than it heaves and swells with passion. As when thou didst good deeds, and madest good offers to me, thou wert not able to boast of having outdone the king in bountifulness, so now, when thou art changed and grown impudent, thou shalt not receive all thy deserts, but less. For thyself and 4 of thy 5 sons, the entertainment which I had of thee shall gain protection. But as for him to whom thou clingest above the rest, the forfeit of his life shall be thy punishment." Having thus spoken, forthwith he commanded those to whom such tasks were assigned to seek out the eldest of the sons of Pythias, and having cut his body asunder, to place the 2 halves, one on the right and the other on the left of the great road, so that the army might march out between them. Then the king's orders were obeyed, and the army marched out between the 2 halves of the carcass. First of all went the baggage-bearers and the sumpter beasts, and then a vast crowd of many nations, mingled together without any intervals, amounting to more than 1/2 of the army. After these troops an empty space was left to separate between them and the king. In front of the king went first 1,000 horsemen, picked men of the Persian nation, then spearmen 1,000, likewise chosen troops with their spearheads pointing towards the ground. Next 10 of the sacred horses called Nisaean, all daintily caparisoned. Now these horses are called Nisaean because they come from the Nisaean plain, a vast flat in Media, producing horses of unusual size. After the 10 sacred horses came the holy chariot of Zeus, drawn by 8 milk-white steeds, with the charioteer on foot behind them, holding the reins, for no mortal is ever allowed to mount into the car. Next to this came Xerxes himself, riding in a chariot drawn by Nisaean horses, with his charioteer Patiramphes, the son of Otanes, a Persian, standing by his side. Thus rode forth Xerxes from Sardis, but he was accustomed every now and then, when the fancy took him, to alight from his chariot and travel in a litter. Immediately behind the king there followed a body of 1,000 spearmen, the noblest and bravest of the Persians, holding their lances in the usual manner. Then came 1,000 Persian horse, picked men, then 10,000 picked also after the rest and serving on foot. Of these last, 1,000 carried spears with golden pomegranates at their lower end instead of spikes, and these encircled the other 9,000, who bore on their spears pomegranates of silver. The spearmen too, who pointed their lances towards the ground, had golden pomegranates, and the 1,000 Persians who followed close after Xerxes had golden apples. Behind the 10,000 footmen came a body of Persian cavalry, likewise 10,000, after which there was again a void space for as much as 2 furlongs, and then the rest of the army followed in a confused crowd. The march of the army after leaving Lydia was directed upon the river Caicus and the land of Mysia. Beyond the Caicus, the road leaving Mount Cana upon the left passed through the Atarnean plain to the city of Carina. Quitting this, the troops advanced across the plain of Thebe, passing Adramyttium and Atandrus, the Pelasgid city. Then, holding Mount Ida upon the left hand, it entered the Trojan territory. On this march the Persians suffered some loss, for as they bivouacked during the night at the foot of Ida, a storm of thunder and lightning burst upon them and killed no small number. On reaching the Scamander, which was the first stream of all that they had crossed since they left Sardis, whose water failed them and didn't suffice to satisfy the thirst of men and cattle, Xerxes ascended into the Pergamus of Priam, since he had a longing to behold the place. When he had seen everything and inquired into all particulars, he made an offering of 1,000 oxen to the Trojan Athena, while the Magians poured libations to the heroes who were slain at Troy. The night after, a panic fell upon the camp, but in the morning they set off with daylight, and skirting on the left hand the towns Rhoetium, Ophrenium, and Dardanus, which borders on Abydos, on the right the Teucrians of Gergis, so reached Abydos. Arrived here, Xerxes wished to look upon all his host. So, as there was a throne of white marble upon a hill near the city, which they of Abydos had prepared beforehand, by the king's bidding, for his especial use, Xerxes took his seat on it, and gazing thence upon the shore below, beheld at one view all his land forces and all his ships. While thus employed, he felt a desire to behold a sailing match among his ships, which accordingly took place, and was won by the Phoenicians of Sidon, much to the joy of Xerxes, who was delighted alike with the race and with his army. And now, as he looked and saw the whole Hellespont covered with the vessels of his fleet, and all the shore and every plain about Abydos as full as possible of men, Xerxes congratulated himself on his good fortune. But after a little while he wept. Then Artabanus, the king's uncle, the same who at the first so freely spake his mind to the king, and advised him not to lead his army against Greece, when he heard that Xerxes was in tears, went to him and said, How different, sire, is what thou art now doing from what thou didst a little while ago. Then thou